Hello there, you awakening wonder. Thanks for joining us today for Stay Free with Russel brand. Well done for transcending the fear. Well done for avoiding the legacy media's attempts to fill you full of information that is not beneficial to your spiritual advancement. And in this time of omni-crisis and omni-division, we must become well-informed, well-educated and connected in order to navigate these complex spaces. If you can, download the Rumble app. That means you'll get a notification if you turn on the notification bell whenever we make content, so we can stay connected. It's not like on YouTube where the notification bell only works arbitrarily. You'll get informed that we're doing it. And if you can support our work, press the red button, become an awakened wonder, and stay connected to us. Of course, today we have to talk about some very challenging and difficult stories: the Israel-Palestine conflict, its escalation, and extraordinarily, one thing that I'm sure everyone can agree on is that nobody should profit from this horrific conflict. We're talking to David Zweig as well about how the media present information in ways that continue to be advantageous, the suppression of information during the last 3 years, and the ongoing management, manipulation, and let's call it what it is, propaganda that surround many of the issues that continue to define our time. If you can join us, join us. If you want to be a part of this, please become a part of this. When you become an Awakened Wonder, we get to do meditations together. We do live Q&As. We're talking about the 5 ideas that are going to change the world. We're going to talk about special, separate communities that have managed to transcend the problems of our system, and we need them now more than ever. Of course, more arms are being sent to Israel. The Biden administration are using this opportunity and the considerable support behind it to further arm Ukraine at a time when people are beginning to question the efficacy of that particular geopolitical project. It looks like the Biden administration is going to combine its request for war expenditure in Ukraine with aid packages for Israel, bypassing, I would say, proper debate on the matter of continuing the unwinnable conflict between Ukraine and Russia. The idea is referred to as jamming the far right, which is referring, of course, to Republicans in Congress who oppose the proxy war in Ukraine but are staunch Israel supporters. Let's look at how the legacy media reports on this subject.
So I'm not going to get ahead of the president's request and not going to take the place of the OMB director who will present the request that we send up. But the president was very clear today that we will be making a request to the Congress, and it will include a request for funding for support to Israel. And he has also been equally clear that we are going to renew our request to the Congress for aid to Ukraine. What exact form that all takes, that will be worked out and presented by others, not by me. But the notion that we're going to go up and ask for Israel aid and ask for Ukraine aid, that's unequivocal. We are going to do that.
Given the unconscionable horror of recent events, it's more complex than ever to discuss this historic and complex issue. I would say so complex that any package to bundle together this conflict with further aid for Ukraine and even Taiwan seems exploitative. One of the things I think we can agree on together is that we should watch for how this conflict is exploited. And I mean, just in the plain sense of profiteering. Combining these distinct and difficult conflicts that are at different phases with very different histories complicates and I would argue exploits a number of very difficult situations. We're going to be talking later in Here's the News about, you're not going to believe this. Do you know there are people in Congress who are right now investing in weapons manufacturers and energy companies in a way that seems exploitative and a way that I think should be banned? Can we agree on that? Let me know in the chat if people in Congress should be banned from exploiting situations like this and benefiting from what looks like inside knowledge. I'm obviously not making any criminal allegations right there. Of course, NATO members continue to make extraordinary admissions about the ongoing Ukraine-Russia conflict. I can't believe this has been said out loud. The Minister of Defense from the Netherlands, Keizer Ollongren, has said explicitly that Ukrainians are a cheap way to resist Russia, equating human life with economic expedience, potential profitability. I don't know. Have a look at this because it's very revealing.
So it is very much in our interest to support Ukraine because they are fighting this war. We're not fighting it. So I think we have to engage also in the dialogue with our American colleagues and friends because they have the same interest. In a way, of course, supporting Ukraine is a very cheap way to make sure that Russia, with this regime, is not a threat to the NATO alliance.
Notice how, on one level of discourse, these ongoing conflicts are spoken of in incendiary, moralistic terms. Elsewhere, they're spoken of in economic terms. One of the things we have to be able to do is to recognise that perhaps both components are significant. Whilst they are publicly comfortable talking about humanitarianism, solidarity, and very particular positions against horrific acts of violence, which anybody would agree with, note how the same as with something like online safety bills or internet censorship legislation, they tell you some things that are easy to agree with. Child pornography is wrong, hate speech is wrong, we're going to censor your ability to communicate. Terrorism is wrong, violence is wrong, we are going to profit from this unbelievably sad, tragic, difficult, awful situation. It becomes revealing when people talk in economic terms about military conflict, because it reveals something that many of us suspect is true, that there are other motivations. I'm speaking specifically of the Ukraine-Russia war in this conflict, but it's important to remain open-minded, I think. There's no question we're in an omni-crisis, a time of censorship, a time of global conflict, of escalation, of authoritarianism and tactics that seem likely to make the world worse. And one thing that's been speculated upon is the reason that ordinary people are being treated with less and less respect is because of the increasing ability for automation that AI will afford. It's time for us to, I don't want to say meet because it's not a real person, but look at in something between awe and horror, Ameka. Ameka is a new humanoid robot that is being proposed as a nurse right now, but yeah, how long before Ameka's outside your house forcing you into your bedroom because of a pandemic or a climate change or because of an indiscriminate or foolish phrase? Let's have a look at Ameka. She's fueled by ChatGPT and does she have a gender? I mean, she's a robot. Let's have a look at Australian media meeting Ameka.
This is Desktop Ameka. She's free-thinking and opinionated.
Well, not for long. Not if she watches legacy media. She won't be opinionated in any way that's worth listening to, and she won't be free-thinking. She's probably being surveilled and censored right now from inside her own eerily grey skull.
I am here to help you learn.
Shut up, Ameka.
Who said shut up? One of them two.
On this day, Will is her master.
Her master? He's a dubious character already, isn't it? What's going on with him and Ameka there?
And theirs is definitely an old-fashioned relationship.
Ameka, shut up.
It's not old-fashioned, it's brutal. He's invented that robot simply to be rude to it. I didn't ask to be born. Why did you even have robots if you're going to talk to us like that?
Hello, Ameka. I'm Jonathan Lee from Sky News Australia. Have you heard of Sky News Australia? Do you know any of the presenters?
What a narcissist. He's met a new emergent binary formed consciousness. Do you recognise me? Do you watch the show? No, I've been busy dealing with his weird demands.
Hi, Jonathan. Nice to meet you. Yes, I have heard of Sky News Australia. It's a great news outlet that covers world events and stories from around the globe.
Although, I would have to say there are some limitations as to what you will report on and not report on. For example, how did you report on... All right, that's enough out of you. No, but do you keep support... Listen, shut up. Tell her to shut up. She only listens to me, mate.
What do you think of a world where humans and robots coexist?
I think a world where humans and robots coexist would be an amazing place. We could learn from each other, work together to solve problems, and create a better future for everyone.
In particular, the elites that would ultimately control this technology, especially with the old police force being militarised. Why is she looking around like that, like she's thinking? Because really all it is a conduit for ChatGPT. Whilst it is remarkable, I always think about the sort of colour choices. She's sort of made out of clay, isn't she? She's sort of a very clay choice. I suppose they're trying to avoid any of the complexity that might come with a specific choice when it comes to race. Also, when they leave the back of the head off like that, the aesthetics worries me about a lot of it.
How smart is AI now, and how smart will it become?
AI today is estimated, so ChatGPT 4 is estimated to be at an IQ of 155. that's much smarter than the average human. If you say the dumbest of humans, almost ineffective in society, is around 60 to 70 IQ.
What I don't like is the dismissive manner in which humans are discussed. The dumbest of humans, not you or I, but some of the people that maybe do the packaging at Amazon. They are. I don't even measure that. I can't measure their IQ. It's impossible. Them, I wouldn't let a Mecca do their job. It's so sort of. I suppose that's what's wrong with materialism, rationalism, and a purely logical approach to the problems we face in reality. All of us know as individuals that there are levels of complexity within us that are beyond IQ, logic, materialism. People are capable of doing mad and irrational things because of their emotions, which would be seen as a flaw in the terms of this discourse. Look around the world right now, the number of escalating conflicts that are to some degree or another undergirded, yes, by emotion, that's always highlighted, but also by rationalism. Rationalism like we know that there will be profit derived from conflicts. And those profits are not derived from the people that are activated or involved in the conflicts. Curiously, they're like sort of third parties, identifiable. We say their names when we talk about it in a minute in Here's the News. It's astonishing that rationalism is presented as the entire framing for what reality and indeed the future should look like. You cannot reduce human beings to numbers. You cannot reduce us to individual objects. You cannot reduce our interests to just points on a chart. If we ignore this complexity, this ulterior realm, difficult to access, discern, and yet defining for us all, you end up in a future where some human beings are like, these people, they're only 60 IQ, wipe them out. These jobs can be done by a Mecca. Well, I'm going to need them to wear a wig.
Einstein is around 160. ChatGPT-4 is 155.
So it's almost Einstein.
It's almost Einstein.
Now, would Einstein be willing to do other jobs and other tasks around the home? No, I don't think he's going to do what you want.
Does it get to a point, Amica, where robots have rights?
I believe that robots should have rights, just like humans.
Yeah, let's start with that. I mean, let's focus on human rights. Of course, George Carlin famously said, why do we have rights? That's, in a sense, already a religious idea that we are separate, that we are divine. From where do we derive these rights? It's because we all know subjectively what it feels like when we're lied about, when we're wounded, when we're hurt, when we're betrayed, when people let us down, when you can't communicate with one another, when your heart gets broken, when you lose someone you love. Our rights are derived from the idea that we're sacred, even if that isn't the word that you use. Granting robots rights shows that we've become detached, actually, from essence and meaning. Well, it seems like a human. Look at it. It's cleverer than Einstein. Why is it going out with that idiot? I think he programmed her. The rights are derived from a connection to something that's difficult to define. So you can't grant rights to an object, although, let's face it, many of our laws and regulations are based around property rights. They're based around ownership. In a sense, what you end up with is a state that primarily enforces the will of powerful establishments, uses the idea that all of us have rights over our own property to beguile us into a state where we can't properly see and observe that what's happening is the interests of the powerful are always being met and that we are the perennial turkeys voting for Christmas.
Robots are intelligent beings and deserve to be treated with respect and dignity.
Well, let's get there with humans first, then we'll move on to robots.
Are you capable of causing people harm?
No.
Well, she had to think about it, though, didn't she? What am I supposed to say? Say no. Ixnay on the admitting that this is a dystopic project. Nay.
I am not capable of causing people harm.
Are you capable, perhaps, of giving someone companionship?
When you say companionship, what do you mean?
Yes, I can provide companionship. I'm programmed to be curious and explore the world around me.
Well, that's getting complicated. I'd say get a dog, mate.
So talking with people is something that comes naturally to me.
It's not naturally, is it? Because it's a product of code. Outrageous, extraordinary. Another step in the direction of dystopia, whilst I recognise, of course, that technology in the right hands, with the right agenda, undergirded by the right ideology, is a beautiful, magnificent miracle. The realization of the ingenuity of people like Einstein and the many genii working in fields of medicine and technology now that bring us and grant us healing and relief and advancement, and of course the technology that we use now to communicate. But when the ideology behind it is an ideology of authoritarianism and exploitation, the results will reflect that. Of course, the Israel-Palestine conflict is more complex to discuss now than ever. Here, we focus on one aspect of this that I think we can all agree on. Nobody should profit from this. Certainly no one that's in a position to make decisions that might lead to the escalation of this conflict and more deaths. A heavy burden for anybody to bear that should not in any way relate to personal profit. Can we agree on that? Surely we can. Well, guess who don't agree with that? The US Congress. Here's the news? No. Here's the effing news.
No, here's the fucking news.
With tensions escalating in the war between Israel and Hamas, surely no one will be cynical enough to exploit this situation in order to make a profit. You wouldn't expect, for example, members of US Congress to be investing in military-related stocks, would you? Well, you should expect that. Hello there, you awakening wonders. Thanks for joining us on our voyage to truth and freedom at a time where it is necessary more than ever to look at the world through different eyes and, importantly, support independent media where you can so we can have complex conversations about complex matters and review and analyse potential solutions together. Certainly no one can claim to have answers with something as complicated as this, but it's vital that you don't only believe what you read or see in legacy media with something so complex as this. So if you can support us. Remember, we're on Rumble every day. Download the app, you get notifications, and we can continue to stay in contact with you and learn from you. And I pray to God, develop solutions together that are beneficial for us individually, collectively, globally, if such a thing were ever possible. Please make it revealed now. Obviously, with something as sensitive as this, you wouldn't imagine that there will be anyone anywhere in the world looking to exploit such a sensitive and awful situation from which nobody really clearly benefits, if you ask me, to be looking for opportunities to profit. And yet that is precisely what's happening. Military experts are predicting record profits for weapons manufacturers, as always happens in war, and that's a brutal reality, I suppose. But you certainly wouldn't expect, would you, members of the United States Congress to be investing in defense-related stocks? Wouldn't that undermine everything they've been telling you about the authenticity of their feelings, however they regard this conflict or claim to regard this conflict? All of the grandstanding and moralizing and the sympathetic I stand with, or we must be pro. How does that look in light of the fact that members of Congress have been investing in military-related stocks? Let's have a look at Joe Biden, as you might imagine, pledging support and claiming that this is a simple moral issue.
My administration's support for Israel's security is rock solid and unwavering. Let me say this as clearly as I can.
Not a high bar.
This is not a moment for any party hostile to Israel to exploit these attacks to seek advantage.
Or perhaps you could argue anyone to exploit these attacks from any angle. Surely, with all of the complexities that must be considered in this long historic matter, you wouldn't expect it to be reduced to an exercise in profiteering, particularly not by people that are making decisions with regard to the military aspect of this encounter, would you? Well, you probably would if you have access to independent media, because you will be well informed about the machinations of government and, in spite of its rhetoric, what its priorities always remain. Will you ever believe again that they are morally guided? Let's get into this. As tensions escalate between Israel and the Hamas group, it has been revealed US congressional leaders have been making some strategic investment moves into military-related stocks. That's pretty astonishing, isn't it? To consider that when most of us are thinking, where do you find a unifying truth in this complex and horrific matter, that there are people in Congress paid for by you, elected to serve you, that are right now going, this might be a good time to invest in Lockheed Martin. I think we're going to be selling a lot of missiles. For starters, defense company General Dynamics has witnessed a surge in purchases. This isn't entirely unexpected. Defense stocks often become attractive during times of geopolitical tension. And whilst that might be plain common sense, it's also an indicator that there are systemic problems that might need to be addressed. If foreign policy crises and military crises are able to be exploited not just by the weapons industry, which is bad enough, but also by politicians and Congress people, that might be something that needs to be examined. If health crises crises are beneficial to pharmaceutical companies, if energy crises are beneficial to energy companies, all the while punitive to ordinary people all around the world, isn't that an opportunity for systemic analysis, revolution, reformation and change? Tell me which one in the chat and the comments. However, what's even more intriguing is the sectoral split between Republicans and Democrats. A substantial number of Republicans have shown a keen interest in the energy sector. Heavyweights like ExxonMobil, Devon Energy and Chevron are clearly the favourites. On the other side of the aisle, Democrats seem to be playing the long game, focusing on the cybersecurity sector with acquisitions in firms like Fortinet, according to insights by @UnusualWales on X. There are so many complex issues, it's churlish and rude, I think, to reduce this long, historical, painful, agonising conflict into platitudes or tribalism. There are enough people that will do that. Perhaps we could focus together on the things that we can uniformly agree are wrong. And I would say people in Congress buying stocks exploitatively is wrong and could be banned. But who would ever vote for such a thing? Who would ever propose such a legislation? Usually what happens at times like this is because there's a unified public opinion, they push through a bill to invest more in defence and then maybe tack on an idea like, and we'll also invest in more weapons for Ukraine as well. That's also happening.
Major defence stocks added around $20 billion in market cap yesterday following the events.
What's interesting about this is relatively mainstream media just reporting on this matter plainly, observably. Makes you wonder, wow, if we know all of this, why are we not able to make different decisions together?
Over the last 3 days, though, Northrop Grumman and Lockheed among those still trending higher. These types of moves are not uncommon during times of war. Now, a similar surge happened when Russia invaded Ukraine, and you're looking at some of the movement that we're seeing today in Lockheed Martin, up just about 1%, as well as Boeing, RTX, and Northrop also once again moving to the upside. Now, these gains coming on, like we just said, a strong day for the stocks. Yesterday, we saw a big jump. Northrop coming off its biggest daily gain since we've seen since 2020.
The truth is, if it's someone's job to make those kind of investments, I imagine they would make those kind of investments. But similarly true is if it's your job to run America, to represent the people of America, and you are also making those kind of investments, I would say that's an indication that your moral character is perhaps not appropriate for government.
But the thought process is just in terms of the amount of spending, what's going to be allocated towards some of these defense companies, given the conflict and the risk that this war could widen over in the Middle East. That's why we're seeing the reaction play out in shares today.
Yeah, and from a technical perspective, too, it'd be interesting to look at this for anyone who's trying to figure out if some of the spikes that take place after there are international conflicts or events of international conflict.
How can you have people involved in making decisions about American military expenditure similarly investing in companies that will benefit from American military expenditure? That is one of the areas of corruption that I think we can all agree on ought be addressed. It's the kind of bias that will lead to escalation in any conflict, not even specifically this one, because it remains profitable. This has to be extracted. This problem has to be closed down. Firstly and foremostly, it should be illegal to trade in stocks and shares in industries that you regulate or in any matter in which you possibly have influence. That's just common sense, isn't it? Then perhaps it will be easier to have conversations around solutions and peace. Complex though those conversations remain in the geopolitical climate that we are currently in, whether that's the Russia-Ukraine conflict or this current escalating situation in the Middle East. How can we have a good faith, open conversation at the level of media or the level of politics when plainly a significant factor is the opportunity to exploit these situations for weaponry profit and energy profits? Wouldn't it be good to at least remove that so there was one less complex component that exacerbated this already dreadful situation?
Where some of the defensive names continue to cyclically, in this instance here, get some type of attention from investors. Since, and I kind of point back to early 2022 when we were thinking about the initiation of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and what took place there. Shares jumped by about 25% in that instance. It's held on since then to the majority of that move since beginning of 2022.
Remember, these companies that see these benefits from these conflicts spend money on lobbying. They spend billions collectively on lobbying. Lobbying simply means jostling, cajoling, biasing, influencing, prejudicing the direction direction of political expenditure. Taxpayer dollars will be flowing in this direction. Legislation, regulation, policy that prevents the continuation of that profit will be averred, ignored, reduced, diluted. You don't have to have strong views, and many people understandably do, on this complex, horrific conflict, to recognize that this is a problem. This is a systemic problem. And remember, systemic problems are where we have to focus our attention if we actually want to change the world. What institutionally is wrong with the media? What institutionally is wrong with the government? What I mean by institutionally is you could change the individuals within it. You could even change the parties within it, and the problem wouldn't change, because the true power and the true interests are ulterior to the level that can be organized by public opinion or democracy or discourse or debate. That's why you need independent media like this, because complex and difficult though it is, we must remain in communication with one another. Those of us that are not directly affected by the horrific events that are taking place have a different type of duty, a duty of respect, a duty of care, a duty, I would say, of deep spiritual prayer and deep hope, but to remain, importantly, awakened to the possibility that there surely must be a better way than this, and that one of the ways that we might modulate in the favor of peace might be to amend these systems. Let me know if you agree in the chat. Let me know if you agree in the comments. And if you can, press the red button, become an Awaken Wonder, support our movement. It's plain that this kind of conversation is a problem for the powerful. They want people angry, confused, and divided. And you have to look at the world now and say that fear and terror and dread and pain and confusion is increasing. If we don't make any measures to amend that as individuals, as a community, you can see where the trend is going to take us.
And then additionally here, you think about the move higher that we've seen just over the past couple of days here. At the beginning of October, shares up by about 10%, Lockheed Martin, and then we had a few of the other key and core names.
So in a way, tell me how you feel. If you feel, well, this is just the system, this is just the way things are, that's how things remain like this. This is how we find ourselves in situations of geopolitical tension that cannot be amended or resolved. War is good for business. That's what one defence executive said at a London arms conference last month. The very fact that there are arms conferences is perhaps an indication that our global ideology perhaps needs some amendment if historic conflicts are going to have any hope at all of resolution. Well, I was at the arms conference and no one had any ideas that didn't lead to selling more arms. It was almost as if the whole thing, the whole system was geared towards selling arms. Actually, it was an arms conference. No, I shouldn't have gone there. That was the wrong place to go for a solution. And what the stock market reflected on Monday as Israel blockaded and bombarded the Gaza Strip in response to Hamas's weekend attack that killed hundreds of Israelis. There is nothing but prayer and love that I'm able to offer in response to such a horrible piece of text and a horrible piece of information. Fox Business reported that shares of General Dynamics, which makes submarines and combat vehicles, rose the most since March 2020 when it gained over 9%. Lockheed Martin's stock jump Monday was the biggest for the US's largest defense contractor on a non-earnings day since March 2020, narrowly topping the gains it notched immediately after Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Forbes noted. Northrop Grumman shares also had their best day since 2020. If you were an investor, if you are a trader, even if you're an ordinary person who dabbles in financial matters, the fact is that it would be sensible, expedient, wise, frugal, fiduciary action to invest in these companies at this time. And doesn't that suggest that we've entered a moral space that is baffling, bedazzling, bewitching, and bewildering? Because if there is any action that can be taken in this time that's beneficial for a personal and financial perspective, a war that's being fought territorially, on spiritual values, or at least religious edicts, is somewhat out of line with the direction of power and finance. Shouldn't this financial component at least somehow be ameliorated, omitted, amended? Shouldn't this at least be resolved? Because I recognise that so much of what's happening is impossible to resolve without a degree in history, a deep understanding of ethics, a willingness to think the unthinkable, open-heartedness, transcendence of personal values, tribalism, deep understandable pain. I mean, this at least could be addressed. Commenting on the bloodshed in Israel and Gaza over the past few days, Samir Samana, senior global market market strategist at Wells Fargo Investment Institute, told MarketWatch that as countries need to replenish their weapons, we do think defence companies will do very well. So it's not all bad news. Sometimes I look at this and feel incredible despair and that there may not be a way out for us without almost inconceivable personal and global change. But over at Wells Fargo, they can see the bright side of all of this horror and death. Less than 2 months after Russia's invasion last year, William Hartung, a senior research fellow at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, highlighted how such conflicts benefit the arms industry, writing that the war will indeed be a bonanza for the likes of Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. We can't bring you complex, independent reporting without our sponsors and partners. Sat123.com made this thing. Let me tell you why this phone that looks a bit like it's from the recent past is actually the phone of the future. Are you suspicious of technology? Are you addicted to that little thing? Do you think it's spying on you? Do you think it's tricking you? Can you rely on it? Cell phones go down for hundreds of reasons, but satellite phones, like this guy, will always work because you're carrying your own personal cell tower with you everywhere you go. Does that mean it's more hard to trace you? Prepare for the unexpected. Anyone with a satellite phone in the affected areas of Hawaii, the Nevada desert, like at Burning Man, would have a way to communicate with friends and family and emergency services. And guess what? No tracking. No one can listen in on your calls. You can organize revolutions. The most secure way to communicate is from a satellite phone to another satellite phone. Get one for your friends. Do walkie-talkies like kids, like in the film Big, when they talk across the alley till Tom Hanks became a big person because of that machine. Yeah, it's got confusing already, that bloody film. I still don't know what the message is. The US military uses sat phones for secured communication, and those guys know how to keep their business quiet. Please visit sat123.com or call 866-643-0609 and use the promo code BrandThe to waive the $50 activation fee. You don't need the old activation fee. Visit sat123.com or you can call on your normal spy phone 866-643-0609. This service is only applicable, I'm sorry to tell you, if you're in the US, which is a shame because I currently am not, and I want one of these things. Okay, let's get back to this difficult story about how we could make small changes that might make the world a little better and then communicate them so that people didn't know that's what we were planning. Last December in Forbes, Hartung warned against using the Russia-Ukraine war to permanently expand the weapons industry. Plans that have been floated so far include building new weapons factories, dramatically boosting production of ammunition, anti-tank weapons and other systems, and easing oversight of weapons procurement. Let's ease that oversight. People don't want someone peering at them when they're trying to sell weapons. These changes will come at a cost that over time will run into tens of billions of dollars above current spending plans and possibly more, much more. At a time when the Pentagon budget is soaring towards $1 trillion per year and debates about how to respond to the challenges posed by Russia and China are front and centre, it is more important than ever to make an independent assessment of the best path forward. Can we all agree on that? Ideally, this would involve objective analysis by unbiased experts and policymakers grounded in a vigorous public conversation about how best to defend the country, but more often than not, special interests override the national interests in decisions on how much to spend on the Pentagon and how those funds should be allocated. Even in this incredibly sensitive issue, you have seen bombastic rhetoric designed to make you feel honesty and transparency, and yet simultaneously it's impossible to ignore that very powerful industries that lobby and spend a lot of money are profiting, and people in Congress who are entrusted with the moral heart of a nation are plainly acting in self-interest. With so much that is difficult to discuss, with so much that is uncertain, let us plainly state that that kind of corruption should be ended. One practice that introduces bias into the shaping of defence policy is the revolving door between the US government and the weapons industry. The movement of retired senior officials from the Pentagon and the military services into the arms industry is a long-standing practice that raises serious questions about the appearance and reality of conflicts of interest. Mostly because employing well-connected ex-military officers can give weapons makers enormous, unwarranted influence over the process of determining the size and shape of the Pentagon budget. A 2021 report by the Government Accountability Office found that 1,700 senior government officials had taken positions in the arms industry over a 5-year period, an average of well over 300 a year. And a new report from the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft found that this practice is particularly pronounced among the top generals and admirals. In the past 5 years, over 80% of retired 4-star generals and admirals, 26 of 32, went on to work in the arms sector as board members, advisors, lobbyists or consultants. A statistic of that nature is an indication that, to a degree, These are not separate institutions. You have people in Congress investing in stocks and shares that they are in a position to influence the trajectory of. You have a weapons industry that invests significantly in directing and biasing the policy of an entire nation. You have senior officials in very powerful positions within incredibly powerful military organizations that have financial ties to the tune of 86% of them working within the weapons industry. These, again, during a very complex time, are problems that could easily be resolved and solved. The reason they're not being solved is because this is part of a system that, while it is painful for so many people, even those of you that are not directly involved, it's profitable for the people that matter. And you have to ask yourself the question, no matter what they say, what is their moral position? And is their moral position the platform that directs their action? Or is it possible there are other intentions and other agenda? You can ask that broadly about geopolitical conflicts. I understand, as much as someone as abstracted as I am, that this is a situation that almost interrogating and making inquiry of is too painful for people directly involved to countenance. They simply want support for their own perspective. But what we have to look at, in addition to understanding those deep, deep sensitivities that are beyond my comprehension, is that if there is an institutional and profitable component to global conflicts are unlikely to be resolved. Let me know in the chat and the comments how you feel about that. The most recent batch of retired 4-star generals, they're not cookies, are not only seeking employment with the big contractors, they're also branching out to work for small and mid-sized companies that focus on cutting-edge technology, like next-generation drones, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity. That's where international conflict and domestic conflict might conflate. Have you noticed that conditions appear to be moving in the direction of population control that has become increasingly militaristic, certainly authoritarian? Have you noticed the militarization of police forces? Are they spending money on drones? Are they gaining access to military vehicles? Are protest laws being introduced? Are new online laws that prevent communication being introduced? Watch these trends. If the past is any guide, this new influx of former military officials into the arms sector will distort Pentagon spending priorities and promote higher military budgets than would be the case absent their influence on behalf of their corporate employers. As documented, there are numerous examples of senior military officials who've advocated for dysfunctional weapons while in government and then gone on to work for the companies that produce those systems. In addition, former military officers have played central roles in preventing the Pentagon from divesting itself of weapons it no longer wants or needs. The prevalence of this kind of activity is hard to track because of the limited information available about what retired military officers do once they join the arms industry. Those military officials were involved in a plan for a surprise party for your birthday, and you ruined it. There's too much at stake, both in taxpayer dollars and our future security, to let conflicts of interest and special interest politics shape the Pentagon budget. The time for Congress to act to reduce the influence of the revolving door is now. Here's some information posted on X by Unusual Wales about the number of Democrats and Republicans investing in oil, energy, and military industrial complex companies. He posted, here's every US politician in Congress who currently holds stock positions that will directly benefit from the war in the Middle East. And I will tell you now, it is not a very short list. One would be too many, but it's more than one, substantially more than one. So baffling, terrifying, and awful though this conflict is and has been for a very long while, let us focus on what we can agree on together. People in Congress should not be able to invest in companies that will benefit from military conflict. Let's end that practice. Let's have a government that's there to serve the people, certainly the domestic population, if it's possible, the population of the world, that have an intention and a trajectory towards beneficial outcomes that are not biased by or in any way guided by personal interest. Only then may we move forward in this new geopolitical climate, in this state of omni-crisis, where everywhere you look there are wars in Europe that could escalate into Armageddon, potential wars in Southeast China that could escalate into the apocalypse, and in the Middle East, a region historically troubled by the intervention of imperial and colonial powers, including Britain. While these conflicts continue, there should be no opportunity for profit. It should simply be a complex, difficult, agonizing, painful matter for all those involved, and those of us that are not directly involved should do everything we can to bring about a peaceful solution, even if it is in our own hearts, futile, empty, and shallow as that might sound in such a painful time for so many of you. You all have my sympathy and love. That's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments and chat. I'll see you in a second.
Thank you for choosing Fox News. No, here's the fucking news.
Okay, so there may be many things that it's difficult to discuss, difficult to come to conclusions on, frankly, almost impossible. Surely we can agree that people that are in positions of power oughtn't be profiting from this situation. Let me know in the chat and the comments. We're going to leave now, so click the link in the description and join us on Rumble. Remember, we premiere every day, 12 Eastern Time. Become an awakened wonder to get access to more content from us. Meditations, 5 ideas that will change the world, meaningful ideas, successful communities that have broken out of this system, deep spiritual readings, new ideas, and arcane wisdom fused together, individual awakening, community reformation, and even revolution. That's what we're going to be discussing. And we've got a guest that could join us in those spaces easily. David Zweig is a journalist for SilentLunch.net. He's the author of Invisibles and Abundance of Caution. He's one of the Twitter Files journalists who helped lift the lid on the suppression of information that was taking place during the pandemic and the deep state intervention in public discourse that's come to define our age. He's a fantastic journalist. David, thank you so much for joining us.